In the fall of 1998, 10,000 feet up in the Uinta Mountains of Utah, Tyler Brennan walked into a basin alone to prove that Bigfoot was just a dumb animal. And for 4 days, it let him believe he was proving it. The person who knew Tyler Brennan best was his older cousin, Sean. They grew up 2 houses apart. Sean was the one Tyler called the night before he drove up into the Uintas, and Sean was the one who eventually sat down and walked through the footage frame by frame, because nobody else in the family could stand to. Everything from here is the way Sean tells it.
I want to be honest about Tyler before I tell you what happened to him, because if I clean him up, it will not make sense. Tyler was not stupid. That is the thing people get wrong when they hear this. He was smart. He read constantly. He could tell you the wingspan of a golden eagle and the gestation period of a black bear, and how a wolf pack decides which animal in a herd is already dying. He loved that stuff. He grew up on it. And somewhere in all that watching and reading, he decided that the natural world was a machine, and that if you learned the machine well enough, there was nothing in it that could surprise you. He said that to me more than once. Nothing in the woods is smarter than a person who did the reading. That was his whole religion right there. So when he got into the Bigfoot thing, he did not get into it the way most people do. He was not scared of it, and he was not in love with it. He treated it like a species he had not gotten around to studying yet. He watched every documentary he could find. He read the encounter reports the way a doctor reads a chart. And he came out the other side completely certain that he had it figured out. It is a mindless ape, he told me. That was the phrase. He must have said it 40 times that last summer. It is a large primate. It runs on instinct, and instinct is predictable. People get killed by it, he said, because people panic. They run, and running triggers the chase response, the same as it would with a dog or a bear. If you do not panic, if you stand your ground and read the animal, it has no idea what to do with you. We argued about it once near the end, and the argument is the reason I know exactly how his mind worked. I told him that even if he was right, even if it was just an ape that size could kill him by accident. A gorilla does not have to hate you to break you. I thought that was the safe argument, the one he could not logic his way out of because it granted him his whole theory and still ended with him staying home. He had an answer ready. He said accidents happen to people who surprise animals, who corner them, who trigger a defensive response. He was not going to do any of that. He was going to be calm and predictable and deferential and give the animal every signal that he was not a threat and not a rival. And a non-threatened animal, he said, has no reason to hurt you. Attacks are defensive. Remove the reason to defend and you remove the attack. It sounds airtight. That is the horror of Tyler. Everything he believed sounded airtight because he had built it out of real facts. True things about real animals, assembled into a shape that did not survive contact with the thing he was actually walking toward. He was not a fool. He was something more dangerous. He was a smart man with a theory he loved more than he loved caution. He had a whole method. He had gotten it out of the documentaries and out of the survival channels and out of his own head, and he had rehearsed it. Stay calm. No sudden movements. Do not break and run, ever. Project confidence because prey does not project confidence, and a predator reads confidence as a signal that you are not worth the trouble. He was going to go up into the Uintas at the end of the season when the crowds were gone, and he was going to find one, and he was going to get close to it, and he was going to prove that a calm man who did the reading had nothing to fear from a mindless ape. I told him not to go alone. He laughed at me. He drove up on a Thursday. The plan was 5 nights, a loop through some drainages up above 10,000 feet, where a few reports had clustered over the years. He had picked the spot the way he picked everything with a spreadsheet. He had cross-referenced sighting reports against terrain and water and season and picked the basin where the numbers were densest. And he had told me the density was the whole point. You do not go looking for a rare animal at random, he said. You go where the animal is. He called me from the trailhead before he lost signal. He was in a great mood. He told me the weather was holding, the aspens were turning, and he had the whole basin to himself. I asked him again to be careful, and he told me in that patient voice he used when he thought I was being soft, that careful was exactly what he was being. Everybody else, he said, goes into the woods with their fear. He was going in with a plan. I asked him what he would do if he actually found one. If it actually came at him. He said that was the part everybody got wrong. He said the answer was that you do nothing. You stand still and you stay calm and you let the instinct in the animal do the reading. And the instinct will tell it that a calm creature is not food and not a rival and not a threat, and it will move off. Panic is the only thing that gets people killed, he said. Panic and running. He was not going to panic and he was not going to run, and so by his own logic, he was not going to get killed. That was the last time I talked to him. Everything after that, I know from the tape. The first night, nothing. You can hear him on the camera setting up camp, narrating to himself the way he always did, like he was filming a show only he could see. He talks about the elevation and the cold and the way sound carries in a basin like that. He is happy. He is exactly where he wants to be. But near the end of that first clip, right before he shuts the camera off, there is a sound. It is far off. It comes from up the slope above the camp. It is low and it does not repeat. And if you did not know what you were listening for, you might think it was a branch under snow load or an elk or nothing at all. Tyler hears it. You can tell because he stops talking, there is a little silence. And then he does the thing he would do the entire rest of the trip. He explains it. He says, on the tape, calm as anything, that sound is almost certainly an elk bedding down, and that the acoustics of the basin are making it seem closer than it is. He sounds pleased to have an answer. He shuts the camera off. I have listened to that sound 100 times. It is not an elk. Something went through his camp that first night while he slept. He does not make a big deal of it on the tape, which is the maddening thing. The morning of the second day, he turns the camera on, and he is annoyed, not scared, and he pans across the little clearing to show what he is annoyed about. A dry bag he had hung from a branch is on the ground. The line is not broken, it is untied. The little stack of firewood he had gathered has been pushed apart. Not scattered like an animal rooting for food, just moved, the pieces set off to the side. And there is one more thing, and he films it, and then he laughs at himself for filming it. There is a line of small stones set along the top of the flat rock by his fire pit, 6 or 7 of them spaced out in a row. He says a squirrel probably knocked the dry bag down and a marmot probably got into the woodpile. And the stones, he says, the stones he must have lined up himself the night before without thinking about it. People do that, he says, idle hands. He does not remember doing it, but memory is unreliable, and a lined-up row of stones is a lot more likely to be a bored man than anything else. He believed that, or he made himself believe it. A dry bag does not untie its own knot, but it fit inside the machine if he did not look at it too hard, so he did not look at it too hard, and he moved on. The next morning he found the first track. He is excited on the tape, but it is a controlled excitement, a scientist finding what he came to find. He describes it carefully, a single impression in the soft ground near a snowmelt seep, maybe 50 yards uphill from where he had pitched the tent, long, deep at the toe, which he notes means weight, means push-off, means something heavy that was moving with purpose. He measures it against his own boot. He talks through the possibility that it is a bear, and then he talks himself out of it because the shape is wrong and there are no claw marks. And the stride, when he finds the next one, is longer than a bear could make. And here's the part that tells you everything about Tyler. He is not afraid. He is delighted. He got what he came for on the second morning. And to him, that is a win, a confirmation, the machine behaving the way the machine is supposed to behave. He says into the camera that the reports were right about the area and that he is going to move his search uphill toward the seep, toward the tracks, toward whatever made them. He packs up and he goes toward it. That is who he was. The first sighting came that afternoon, and it came at distance. The footage is bad. He is filming handheld, breathing hard from the climb, and the thing is a long way off, across the drainage, moving through timber at the edge of a meadow. You get maybe 3 seconds of it. Dark, upright, tall, moving between the trees with that rolling walk that does not look like a man and does not look like a bear. And then it is gone into the timber, and the footage is just aspens shaking in the wind. Tyler is thrilled. He is whispering, but it is a whisper full of triumph. He says he saw it. He actually saw it. It is real, and it is exactly the size the reports described. He is not scared. He is a bird watcher who just added a life bird. He says the animal moved off because it caught his scent, which is normal prey and observer behavior, which is exactly what a large shy primate would do. That is the last time on the tape that the thing behaves the way he expected it to. After that, it stops running. Later that same afternoon, he realized he was being followed, and he was happy about it. He had moved higher, working a game trail toward a saddle, and he started noticing that the sounds behind him kept pace with him. He would stop, and the sound behind him would stop. He would move, and after a beat, it would move. He tested it. On the tape, you can hear him stop deliberately, wait, and then say, pleased, that it did it again, that whatever was back there matched him. Any part of your brain that is older than your opinions is screaming at this point. Being paced by a large predator in thick timber is one of the oldest bad situations a human body knows. And Tyler stood on that trail and grinned at his camera and called it following behavior, said it was habituation, said the animal was curious and tracking him at a safe distance the way a young primate might shadow something new in its territory. He decided the following was a good sign. He decided it meant the animal was comfortable with him. He turned around and kept climbing toward the saddle, with the thing that was pacing him now somewhere behind and above. And he did not once consider that a predator does not pace what it is afraid of. It paces what it is deciding how to take. The second night is when it came to the camp. You can hear it before you can see anything because he had the camera running inside the tent. There are footsteps, slow, deliberate, heavy enough that you can hear the ground take the weight. They come from the tree line and they stop maybe 30 feet out, and then they just wait. An animal does not do that. A bear that wanders into your camp is either leaving or coming for your food. It does not stop at 30 feet in the dark and stand still and wait. Tyler knows something is out there. You can hear his breathing change, but then you hear him do the thing again, quieter now, talking himself down. He tells himself and the camera that curiosity is a known primate behavior, that a young or unafraid individual might approach a camp to investigate, and that the correct response is to stay calm and let it satisfy its curiosity and move on. He unzips the tent. I want to reach into the tape and stop him every time. He unzips the tent and he points the camera out into the dark, and there is nothing to see, just the shape of the trees against a sky full of stars and the sound of something breathing that is not him. It stays out there for a long time, long enough that the clip runs out. When the next clip starts, it is morning and the thing is gone. and Tyler is describing the encounter to the camera like a man filing a report. He is calm, he is thrilled. He notes that it approached to within 30 feet and did not act aggressively, and he concludes from this that his method is working. Calm behavior, he says, produces calm behavior. The animal read that he was not a threat. He had it exactly backward and he could not see it. It was not deciding he was not a threat. It was deciding he was not going anywhere. That third morning, he found the ring around his camp. He walked the perimeter with the camera because he had woken up to find the woodpile disturbed again, and this time he did something methodical. He circled the whole camp at about 40 yards out, looking for sign, and he found it. Tracks, not one, not two, a ring of them. The same long, deep impression over and over, going all the way around the clearing where his tent stood. Something had walked a complete circle around him in the night. It had come in close on one side where the tracks bunched up near the flat rock, and then it had walked the entire circumference of his camp, staying just outside the edge of where he would have heard it. And it had left. He described the ring carefully, and then he interprets it, and the interpretation is the machine at full strength. He calls it territorial patrolling. He says the animal is defining the boundary of a space it now considers contested, that this is instinctive marking behavior, that it is fascinating and consistent with a large territorial mammal. It is a ring around a man. There is no version of a mindless animal that walks a deliberate, closed circle around the one thing in the basin that does not belong there. But he had a word for it, and the word let him stay, so he stayed. Then there was the knocking. That afternoon, he started an experiment. He had read that these things knock, that they strike wood against wood to communicate, and he decided to test it. He found a dead limb and he struck it twice against a trunk, hard, 2 flat cracks that carried across the basin, and then he waited with the camera running. Nothing came back for almost a minute, long enough that he starts to say on the tape that the experiment appears to be a negative result. And then, from up the slope, from the direction of the saddle, 2 knocks came back. 2. The same count he had made. He loses his composure a little here, for the first time in a good way, in an excited way. He whispers that it answered, that it returned the exact number, that this is a communicative response, and it is extraordinary. And it is extraordinary. He is right that it is extraordinary. He is just wrong about what it means because he thinks he is having a conversation. And what is actually happening is that something up the hill has just learned that if it makes the sound, the man will answer and the man will tell it. With every answer, exactly where the man is. He knocked back. Of course he did. And it answered again, closer this time. And he did not understand that he was reeling it in on a line, and that he was holding the other end. The third day is when the sound started that should have sent him home. He is up above the seep now, higher in thicker timber, and he has started leaving the camera running for long stretches to catch ambient noise. On one of those long clips in the middle of the afternoon, you hear it. It is a voice, not words, not quite. It is the shape of a voice, low and wrong, coming from the timber off to his right, rising and falling like speech with everything that makes speech human stripped out of it. It goes on for a few seconds and then it stops, and Tyler, God help him, gets excited again. He has read about this, vocalizations he calls them. He says on the tape that primate species produce complex vocalizations and that what he just heard is consistent with reports and represents, in his words, incredible data. He is not hearing a thing in the woods make a sound no throat should be able to make. He is collecting incredible data. I have played that clip for 2 different people and both of them turned pale. It is not incredible data. It is something that listened to a human voice long enough to learn the melody of it and never learn the words, and it was standing close enough to Tyler when it did it that you can hear the timber creak as it shifted its weight. He did not go home. He noted the time and the direction, and he wrote it down, and he stayed. That third night, it came all the way to the tent. The second night, it had stopped at 30 feet. This time, there was no 30 feet. He had the camera going inside the tent again, and on the tape, you hear the footsteps come out of the timber the way they had before, slow and heavy. But they do not stop at the edge of the clearing. They keep coming. They come right up to the wall of the tent, close enough that when the thing shifts its weight, you can hear the nylon move. And then there is the breathing. It is right there, inches away through a wall of thin fabric, slow and deep and wet. And it goes on and on. Tyler is dead silent. For the first time on the whole tape, he does not narrate, he does not explain, he does not reach for a documentary fact. He just lies there in the dark and breathes as quietly as he can while the thing outside breathes as loud as a bellows. And the two of them stay like that, separated by nothing, for what the timestamp says is nearly 4 minutes. He told me once, months before, that fear was a failure of preparation, that a prepared man does not feel it. I think about that when I listen to those 4 minutes, because whatever Tyler felt in the tent that night with that breathing on the other side of the fabric, it was not the calm confidence of a man who did the reading. It was the oldest thing there is. He just could not admit it to the camera, so he said nothing at all. In the morning, he mentions it almost in passing. He says there was a close nocturnal approach, and that he chose to remain still and non-reactive, which de-escalated the situation. He makes it sound like a technique. It was not a technique. He froze, the way anything freezes, and he got lucky that freezing was, that night, the thing that bought him the morning. He smelled it too. He mentions the smell and then never mentions it again because it does not fit anything. A thick, low, rotten smell, he says, that was in the tent when he woke and gone by the time he got outside. He does not have a documentary fact for a smell that comes in the night and leaves at dawn, so he lets it go. On the fourth day, he found the arrangement. He describes it slowly, and for the first time on the whole tape, there is something underneath his voice that is not certainty. Not fear exactly, but a hesitation. He had come back to camp from a morning scout and found, laid across the flat rock where he'd been eating his meals, a small arrangement of sticks, not scattered, placed. He describes them as laid in a rough pattern, deliberate, the kind of thing a person would do, except no person had been within miles of him in 4 days. He talks himself through it. He really does try. He suggests it could be a natural fall of branches that happens to look intentional. He suggests he might have arranged them himself and forgotten. He does not believe either of those things. You can hear it, but he says them because the alternative does not fit inside the machine. A mindless ape does not leave you a message. A mindless ape does not have a reason to. And this is the crack. This is where it starts to come apart, right here on the fourth day. Because for the first time, Tyler is looking at something his theory cannot hold, and instead of letting the theory break, he makes himself smaller to fit inside it. He decides it is a display behavior, territorial, instinctive. He writes it down. And then he does the thing that killed him. He decides that since the animal is displaying, the animal is engaging with him, and that engagement is an opportunity. He decides to get closer. He also decided to answer it. This is the part I understand the least and hate the most. He had read that some people leave gifts, that you can build trust with an intelligent animal through exchange, and even though he did not believe it was intelligent, he decided the arrangement of sticks was an opening and he was going to meet it. He took a granola bar and an apple from his pack and he set them on the flat rock where the sticks had been, and he backed off and he filmed the rock and he waited. He talks while he waits, and it is the most unguarded he gets on the whole tape. He says that if the animal takes the food, it proves interaction, it proves habituation, it proves everything he came to prove. He says this could be the encounter that changes how people understand the species. He is not scared, he is ambitious, he is a young man who thinks he is standing at the edge of something that will make his name. The food was gone in the morning, and in its place, on the rock, there was a stone. One stone set in the center where the food had been. He calls it an exchange. He says the word out loud, thrilled, that it took his offering and left one of its own, that this is reciprocal behavior. And reciprocal behavior implies a level of cognition that would be, in his words, the discovery of the century. He had it in his hands, right there, the proof of the exact thing his whole theory denied. A mindless ape cannot make an exchange. Reciprocity is a mind. He said the word himself, cognition, and it did not land because he wanted the discovery more than he wanted to be afraid. And you cannot want both at once and survive that place. Every day it had come closer. The circle, then the tent, then the exchange. And instead of reading the tightening spiral for what it was, he read it as a relationship. He thought they were getting to know each other. Only one of them was. The fourth night is when the whole basin went quiet, and then something called his name. There's a long clip from that night, the camera propped by the fire, and the first thing you notice is what you cannot hear. The basin had been alive every night, insects, the wind in the aspens, a creek somewhere below, the small constant noise of a living place. And on this clip, all of it is gone. Dead silence. The kind of silence that falls over country when everything smaller than the thing that just arrived has decided to hold very still. Tyler notices it too. He says on the tape that the ambient sound has dropped out completely and that this often indicates a large predator in the immediate area. He says it like a fact on a card. He does not say the thing the fact is actually telling him, which is get up, put out the fire, and do not be here. And then, out of that silence, from the dark past the firelight, a voice says his name. It is not right. It is his name in the shape of a voice that learned it by hearing it and never learned what a voice is for, flat and stretched, and coming from too low in a chest that is too big. But it is his name, Tyler, clear enough that there is no pretending it was the wind. He goes completely silent. The clip runs for another 30 seconds of nothing, just the fire, just him not breathing, and then it cuts off. He never explains that one. That is the thing. Every other impossible thing on the tape, he had a card for. The voice saying his name, he has nothing. There is no clip of him the next morning calmly calling it vocal mimicry and moving on. He just does not mention it. I think it is the one thing that got all the way through, the one moment the theory cracked wide enough for the truth to look out. And I think he could not stand to look back at it, so he pretended it did not happen and he kept going. Because the alternative was to understand what it meant. It meant the thing had been close enough, often enough, listening long enough to learn his name off his own tongue. He had been saying it to the camera for 4 days. Tyler here, day 3, Tyler signing off. And something in the dark had been keeping it. The way it kept the count of his knocks, the way it kept the shape of his voice, saving it up for the night it wanted to prove that it knew him. He wrote in his little notebook, which they found, that the 4th night had included significant vocal activity. That was all he wrote, significant vocal activity. A thing said his name in the dark in his own voice, and he put down 3 flat words for it, and underlined none of them. The last full day, it watched him. There is a stretch of footage that afternoon, almost 20 minutes, where he has the camera set on a rock while he filters water and organizes his pack. and for that whole 20 minutes, there is a shape in the timber at the edge of the frame. You would miss it if you were not looking. It does not move much. It is behind a screen of trunks, upslope, and it is the same dark, upright mass you saw for 3 seconds 2 days before, except now it is not moving off. It is standing there, watching him work. Tyler does not know it is on camera. He is busy. He is humming. And the thing stands in the trees and watches a man filter water for 20 minutes with a patience that no animal I have ever heard of possesses. When he finally notices it, near the end of the clip, his voice changes. This is the first time. He goes quiet, and then he says, very softly, that it is back, and that it is close, and that it has been there a while. And for just a second, 1 second, the certainty is gone, and there is just a man alone in the woods, realizing that the thing he came to study has been studying him. Then he pulls it back. You can hear him do it. He takes a breath, and he tells the camera that this is an unprecedented opportunity for close observation, and that he is going to attempt a slow, calm approach, non-threatening, by the book, everything he rehearsed. But before that, and I did not notice this the first 3 times I watched it, there is a moment where he thinks about leaving. It is small. After he realizes the thing has been watching him for 20 minutes, there is a clip that night back at the tent where his voice is different, lower. The narration has less shine on it. He talks about the day, and then he says, almost to himself, that he has good data, more than enough, and that he could break camp in the morning and hike out and call the trip a success. He almost went home. That is the thing that undoes me. On the 5th morning, he was one decision away from walking out of the basin alive, and I can hear him get right up to the edge of it. And then he talks himself out of it. He says that leaving now with the animal this habituated, this comfortable, this close, would be leaving the real prize on the table. He says a lesser researcher would settle for footage from a distance. He says he did not come all this way to settle. He says he is going to stay 1 more day and attempt direct contact. He convinced himself that staying was the brave choice and leaving was the coward's choice, when it was exactly the other way around. The bravest thing a man can do in that situation is admit he is out of his depth and walk down the hill. Tyler could not do it because walking down the hill meant admitting the thing had gotten to him. And admitting the thing had gotten to him meant admitting it was not just a mindless ape. So he stayed. For his theory, he died for a theory. He picks up the camera and he starts walking toward it. The approach is the hardest part of the tape to watch because it is so slow and because he is so proud. He narrates the whole thing in a whisper. He is doing everything right by his own rules. He moves slowly. He keeps his posture open. He does not stare directly at it. He talks in a low, even voice, not to the animal, he is careful to say, but to the camera, describing what he is doing so that the footage will have value. And the thing lets him come. That is the horror of it, watching it now. It does not retreat. It does not charge. It just waits, upslope, mostly hidden, and it lets him close the distance 1 careful step at a time. And every step it does not run, Tyler reads as proof. Proof that he was right. Proof that the calm approach works. Proof that it is a mindless animal responding predictably to a confident, knowledgeable human who did the reading. There is a point in the approach, maybe halfway, where the thing does move, and for 1 second the whole story could have ended differently. It shifts. It turns its body toward him, squares up, and even through the shaking frame, the size of it becomes suddenly horribly clear, the shoulders filling the gaps between the trees, the head coming up. And Tyler stops. His breath catches on the tape. For 1 second, the animal part of him that his theory could never fully silence stands up and screams, and he goes rigid. And I think if the thing had done anything at all in that second, made a sound, taken a step, he would have broken and run, and it would have taken him then and there. But it does nothing. It just squares up and holds and lets him feel the size of it and waits. And Tyler breathes out, and he tells the camera in a whisper that is trying very hard to be steady that the animal has shifted to a more open posture and that he reads this as acceptance. Acceptance. It turned its full body toward him, and he called it acceptance, and he kept walking. I do not think it was showing him acceptance. I think it was letting him get a good look at what he was about to touch. And I think if a thing like that can want anything, it wanted him to understand, in the last clear moment it was going to give him, exactly how badly he had misjudged the size of the thing he had decided was simple. He kept walking. He gets close. Closer than anyone in their right mind would ever want to be. Close enough that the shape in the trees stops being a shape and starts, in fragments through the shaking frame, to be a face. I am not going to describe it. The footage never gives you all of it at once, and I am glad, because the pieces are enough. A brow, a flat, wide plane of a face that is too human to be an ape and too wrong to be a man. Hair matted dark and pale at the muzzle, and eyes that catch the low light and hold it, flat and reflective, and that are not looking past him or around him, but directly, steadily at him. He whispers that it is beautiful. He whispers that it is not afraid of him. He whispers that he is going to try to make contact. And he lifts his hand. You have probably seen the still. A lot of people have. It is the second to last frame the camera recorded before the mount broke. It is Tyler from the side, his hand raised palm out toward the creature's face. The gesture soft and slow, the gesture from every documentary he ever watched. The one that is supposed to say, I mean you no harm, I am not a threat. We are two calm minds meeting in the dark. His forehead is nearly touching its forehead. He is not running. He did everything he told me he would do. He stayed calm. He did not panic. He read the animal, he projected confidence, and the thing let him do all of it, right up until his palm was an inch from its face. Because it was never confused by him. It was never wondering what he was. It knew exactly what he was the whole time, from the first night at 30 feet, from the 20 minutes in the trees. It had been close enough to touch him for days, and it had chosen not to. And Tyler read that choosing as the absence of a mind. It was the presence of one. The last frame is the hand closing, not the creature's whole body, not a lunge, nothing cinematic. Just in the corner of a shaking frame, the moment its hand comes up and closes over his shoulder, the fingers going all the way around and the camera dropping and the ground. Then the clip ends. Reporter voice returns here. Tyler Brennan was reported overdue by his family after he failed to return on the 5th day. Search and rescue teams from 2 counties worked the drainage system above his last known camp for 11 days before the effort was scaled back. His tent was found intact. His pack was found 40 yards from the tent. Most of his gear was accounted for. The camcorder was not recovered during the official search. It was found the following month by a hunter, wedged in the root ball of a downed spruce, roughly 200 yards uphill from the camp. At an elevation Tyler would have had no ordinary reason to reach. The mount was broken, the housing was cracked, the tape inside was intact. The medical examiner's findings regarding the partial remains recovered the following spring were not released to the public, and the family has not made them available. The county listed the manner of death as undetermined. The case is closed. There was a notebook recovered with his pack. Water damaged, but mostly legible. It contained his observations, dated and timed, in the clipped clinical shorthand of a man documenting a study. The tracks, the vocalizations, the circle around the camp, the exchange on the rock, all of it recorded in the flat language of data right up to the 5th morning. The final entry is not clinical, it is one line, and the handwriting is different from the rest, faster, pressed harder into the paper. It reads that he thinks it wants him to come closer. That is the last thing written in the book. He thinks it wants him to come closer, and he was right. It did want him to come closer, and he wrote that down as if it were an invitation instead of the oldest trap in the world. The last audible thing Tyler Brennan says on the recording in the seconds before he lifts his hand is that the animal is calm, that his method is working, and that this is going to change everything. He was right about the last part. Here is what his confidence never had room for. Tyler thought the danger was in the animal not understanding him. He built his whole method around being understood, around sending the right signals, around proving he was not prey. He never once considered that it understood him perfectly, and that understanding him was exactly what made him prey.
He called it mindless because a mind was the one thing his theory could not survive. But he was not killed by a mindless animal that panicked. He was killed by something that waited for 4 days, that never once lost track of where he was, that let him believe he was in control, because letting him believe it was the easiest way to close the distance. He did the reading, he just read the wrong book. The man made a mistake, and it killed him for it. Real or fake, you decide. In the fall of 1999, on the floor of a dry gravel wash in the Ochoco country of Central Oregon, Kyle Roberts did everything he had been told to do, and it killed him in under 10 minutes. Kyle Roberts was a 29 hiker. He was not reckless. If anything, he was the opposite. He was a careful man, a planner, the kind who read everything before he did anything. And that carefulness is exactly what killed him, because he read the wrong thing and then he trusted it completely.
He had gotten interested in the encounter reports the year before he died. And the thing he kept coming back to, the thing that reassured him, was the survival advice. There's a whole body of it out there, printed in the paperbacks and the field guides, traded in the back pages of the outdoor magazines, repeated by confident men at trailheads as if it were settled fact. The core of it is simple, and it sounds so reasonable. If you meet one, do not run. Running makes you prey. Stay calm, get low. Make yourself small and unthreatening. Do not meet its eyes. Do not challenge it. Wait, and it will lose interest, and it will leave. Kyle wrote that advice down. People who knew him say he could recite it. He treated it the way Tyler treated his documentaries, as a method, a set of rules that turned a terrifying unknown into a manageable procedure. He was not going out there to prove anything. He just wanted to hike the Ochoco country, and he had convinced himself that if the worst happened, he knew the procedure, and the procedure would keep him alive. The man who saw Kyle Roberts die was named Gary Pell. He was 51 years old. He had hiked the Ochoco country his whole life, and he watched the entire thing through a long camera lens from the far side of a ravine, close enough to see it clearly, and far enough that there was nothing on earth he could have done. He did not tell anyone for a long time. When he finally did, this is the account he gave. Everything from here is the way Gary tells it. I need you to understand that I saw it coming before he did, and that is the part I live with. I was up on the east rim that morning, glassing the opposite slope for elk. It was cold and still, and the light was flat and gray. There's a dry wash that runs along the bottom of that drainage, a wide bench of pale gravel and dust, open, no cover, the kind of place you can see a long way across. I saw the young man first. He was down on the wash, maybe a quarter mile from me across the ravine, walking easy, a day pack on, no idea in the world that anything was wrong. Just a guy out for a hike on a cold morning. And I saw the other thing before he did. It was up in the brush above the wash, off to his left and behind him, and it was not moving. It was watching him come. I put the glass on it, and my stomach went cold because I knew, the way you know, that it was not a bear and it was not a man. It was tall, even hunched down in the brush, and it was the color of the dead leaves around it. And it was completely, unnaturally still, and it was tracking him. I wanted to yell. The distance and the wind would have eaten it. There was a ravine between us. There was nothing I could do but watch, so I did the only thing I could think to do. I started filming. He figured out something was there a few seconds after I did. You can see it on my footage. He stops. His head comes up. He goes still, and then he does something that I understood immediately, because I have read the same things he read. He crouches down, low and slow. He tucks himself smaller. He turns his face away, deliberately, so he is not looking at it. He lowers himself until he is sitting down in the open on the pale gravel, arms in, head down, making himself into the smallest, quietest, least interesting shape a man can make. And I knew exactly what he was doing, and I knew it was going to get him killed, because I know where that advice comes from. Everybody who spends time in that country has heard it. If you meet one, do not run. Running makes you prey. Go passive. Get small. Do not challenge it. Do not meet its eyes. Do not give it a reason. Wait. It will decide you're not worth the trouble, and it will move on. I believed that too once, and then I watched it happen to Kyle Roberts, and I do not believe it anymore, and I will tell you why. The advice assumes the thing is looking for a threat. It is not. It already knows you are not a threat. That was never the question it was asking. I watched him run the whole procedure, and I watched every step of it make things worse. I could see it on his body through the glass, the way he was working down a checklist in his head. First, he went still. That is step one, do not run, and he did not run, and I could see him deciding not to, could see the effort it took to override the thing in his legs that wanted to move. Then he got low. Step two. Then he turned his face away, and I knew he was on step three, do not meet its eyes, do not challenge it. And the entire time he was ticking off his safe little list, the thing in the brush was reading him, and it was not reading a checklist. It was reading a body that had just told it, in the clearest possible language, that this one will not fight and will not flee. He thought he was sending the signal for leave me alone. He was sending the signal for I am the easy one. I have hunted my whole life. I know what an animal looks like when it is deciding whether to commit, and I know what one looks like when it already has. That thing in the brush was not deciding. Kyle's procedure was not an input to a decision. The decision was made before he ever got low. Everything he did after that just told it he was going to be no trouble at all. I knew because it had almost ended me the same way years before. And the only reason I'm here to tell you about Kyle is that I got lucky in the one way he did not. I was younger, I was up a different drainage, alone, and I came around a bend in a game trail, and one of them was just there, closer than Kyle ever got until the end. And I did the advice. Nobody had to teach it to me. It is just what your body reaches for when it decides you cannot win. I froze, I got small, I looked away, I waited. And it came toward me exactly the way this one came toward Kyle, slow and certain, and I stood there being small, and it got close enough that I could smell it. And every single thing in the advice was happening, and none of it was helping. And I understood in that moment with total clarity that being still was not going to save me, that it was reading my stillness and coming anyway, that the stillness was not a shield, it was a menu. What saved me was not the procedure, it was that I panicked, the thing the advice tells you never to do. I broke every rule at once. I yelled. I made myself as big as I could. I threw my pack at it. I roared like an animal, and I did not run because there was nowhere to run. So instead, I turned into the loudest, largest, most unpredictable and expensive-looking problem I could possibly become. And it stopped. It did not like it. Something about a thing that suddenly became a problem instead of a meal made it hesitate. And it backed off 2 steps, and I kept being a problem, and it turned and went back up the hill. I do not tell people to do what I did because I do not know if it works twice, and I do not know if it works for anyone but me on that one day. But I know this, the thing that saved my life was the exact opposite of the thing Kyle was told would save his. He did everything I was told to do, everything I did the first time before I threw it all away, and I watched where it goes because I was 1 bad second away from going there myself. Every step of the advice he followed, I counted it off like a countdown because I knew where it ended and I had stood 1 step from the end of it myself. The thing came down out of the brush slow, not a charge, nothing like a charge. It came down onto the wash the way you would walk up to something you already had, unhurried, and it crossed the open ground toward him with this awful patience, and Kyle held his pose. He did not run. He did not look up. He stayed small and still exactly the way he had been told, and the whole time the thing was closing the distance, and every foot it came, the advice was being proven wrong, and he could not see it because his face was turned away. I had the glass on his face for part of it. He had his eyes shut. He was doing everything right by the book he had read, and the book was walking him straight into the ground. It came up on him and it stopped, and it stood over him. I have thought a lot about that next part, the part where it just stood there, because that is the part that broke the theory for me. It stood over him for a long time, a minute, maybe more. Towering, this dark bulk against the pale gravel, and Kyle sitting at its feet with his head down and his eyes closed, waiting for it to lose interest and leave. And here's the thing nobody who gives that advice understands. It was not losing interest. It was not deciding whether he was worth the trouble. That whole minute it stood there, it was not hesitating. It was looking at him the way you look at something you have already decided about. The stillness was not mercy, and it was not indecision. He thought the stillness meant it was working. The stillness was just the space between the decision and the doing. At one point it reached down, slow, and it moved him a little with one hand, the way you might turn something over to look at it, not violent, almost gentle, testing him. And Kyle did the exact right thing according to the advice. He did not react. He stayed limp and small and passive and gave it nothing. He thought he was being invisible. He was being cooperative. He was making himself easy. It tested him more than once. That is the part that stays with me. It was not a single grab and go. It was patient about it, methodical, the way you check whether something is really as harmless as it looks. Before you commit to carrying it, it nudged him and got nothing. It leaned down close over him, close enough that its face was right at his, and Kyle kept his eyes shut and did not flinch, and it got nothing. It put a hand flat on his back and pressed, testing his weight, testing whether he would suddenly become a problem, and he gave it nothing because nothing was what he had been told to give. and every test he passed, in his mind, he was failing in the only way that mattered. Every time he held still and gave it nothing, he was answering the real question, which was never, "Are you a threat?" It was always, "Will this one fight me when I take it?" And his answer, over and over, calm and disciplined, and exactly by the book, was no. No, I will not fight you. No, I will be no trouble. No, you can take your time. He passed every test the advice set for him and failed every test the creature was actually giving. And the two sets of tests were opposites, and nobody had ever told him that because the people who wrote the advice had never watched it run to the end. I had. I was watching it right then, and I wanted to scream down into that ravine that every second he stayed calm was a second he was talking that thing into it. But the wind would have eaten my voice, and I was not sure, even then, God help me, that scaring it was not worse. There was a stretch in the middle where I honestly thought the advice might be working, and I want to tell you about it, because I think it is the cruelest part. After it moved him with its hand and he did not react, it straightened back up. And it stood there again, and a few minutes went by and nothing happened, and I felt this awful hope start to come up in me because that is what the advice promises. Wait long enough, give it nothing, and it gets bored and it leaves. I actually started to believe I was about to watch it work. I started to believe the young man was going to sit there long enough that the thing would turn around and walk back up into the brush, and he would get up and walk away and have a story. Kyle believed it too. I could see it. Somewhere in that long wait, his shoulders came down a little. The tension went out of him by a degree. He had run the procedure, and the procedure seemed to be doing what it promised. The thing was just standing there, not attacking, and every second it did not attack, he must have felt more sure that he had done it right, that he was going to live, that the men who wrote the books were correct. That is the trap. That is the exact trap. The waiting feels like winning. Right up until it isn't, the stillness and the winning look identical, and there is no way from the inside to tell the difference between a thing that has lost interest and a thing that is simply taking its time. The hope I felt watching and the hope he felt sitting there were the same hope, and it was wrong. It was just the long pause before the thing did what it had already decided to do, and both of us mistook the pause for mercy. There was a moment, and I will carry it the rest of my life, where I almost stood up and fired a shot into the air. I had a rifle. I did not have a shot at the thing, not across that ravine, not without the real chance of hitting the young man, but I could have fired into the air. I could have made noise. I could have done something, and I did not, because a colder part of my brain was doing the math, and the math said that if I spooked it and it decided to move fast, the young man was closer to it than he would ever be to me. And the only thing a gunshot might do is change a slow, terrible thing into a fast one. I told myself I was protecting him by staying quiet. I do not know if that was true. I have never known if that was true. That is the thing I actually live with more than the rest of it. Not that I watched, that I did the math, and the math let me stay still, and staying still felt a lot like the same advice that was killing him. We were both being passive. We both thought passive was the safe thing. Only one of us was close enough to find out it was not. Then its posture changed, and I knew. I had been watching this thing for what felt like an hour, though the footage says it was closer to 10 minutes, and I had learned the shape of it standing at rest, and all at once that shape changed. It lowered. Its weight came forward. The stillness that had been the stillness of something waiting became the stillness of something about to move. And even at a quarter mile through a lens, I felt it in my gut like a dropped elevator. Kyle did not see it. His head was still down. His eyes were still closed. He was still running the procedure, still being small, still giving it nothing. And he had no idea that the thing above him had just crossed over from waiting into acting. because the procedure had never told him what that looked like. The procedure had told him what to do to make it leave. It had never once told him how to know when it had decided to stay. That is the gap the advice leaves you in. It gives you rules for the beginning and it gives you nothing for the end. And by the time the end comes, you are sitting in the open with your eyes shut, trained by your own hand to hold perfectly still, at the precise moment when the only thing that could possibly help you is to already be gone. I opened my mouth. I do not even know what I was going to do. There was no time to do anything. It stood him up. That was the moment the theory died, for good, on my footage. After that long minute, after the testing, the thing reached down and took hold of him, and there was no more question about whether it was going to lose interest and wander off. Kyle finally broke. You can see it. The passivity finally cracked, and some animal part of him understood, way too late, that the plan had failed, and he started to move, started to try to get his feet under him, started to do the thing the advice had told him never to do. And it was too late, because you cannot switch from prey to fighter after you have spent 5 minutes teaching the thing that you will not resist. He had trained it that whole time that he was easy. Now he wanted to not be easy, and there was no time left to become anything else. The last of it is fast, and it is on the gravel, and I have thought about whether to describe it at all. I was already moving by then. I had dropped the camera off my eye, and I was on my feet, and I was starting down the rim toward the ravine, which was insane because the ravine was a 1/4 mile of broken rock, and it would have taken me 20 minutes to get down one side and up the other. And I knew that. I knew it while my legs were doing it anyway, because there is a point where watching becomes unbearable and the body just tries to close the distance, even when the mind knows the distance cannot be closed in time. I got maybe 10 steps before I understood there was no point, and I stopped and I put the glass back up because the only thing left that I could do for that young man was see it. Be a witness. Not let it happen with nobody watching. That is a terrible thing to be able to offer somebody, and it was the only thing I had. It took him by the leg. He went down onto the wash and it started to move, and he came with it, dragged one leg up in its grip, and the rest of him sliding across the pale dust. And there is dust coming up in a cloud, and there is the blue of his jeans and the dark of his jacket, and his hands scrabbling at the gravel for anything to hold. And there was nothing to hold because he had picked the open ground on purpose, because the open ground had felt safe. That is the last cruelty of it. He sat down in the open because he could see all around him, and being able to see felt like safety. And when it took him, there was not a root or a rock or a branch within reach. Nothing to grab, nothing to slow it, just a wide, flat pan of gravel built for exactly one thing, which was to let something drag something else across it without any friction at all. It moved fast once it committed. That was the last surprise, how fast. For the whole standoff it had been slow, patient, all that terrible, unhurried care. And the moment it decided the care was done, it moved like the slowness had been a lie the entire time, like the patience had cost it nothing. And it could have done this at any second in the last 10 minutes and had simply chosen not to. It crossed that open ground toward the trees at a speed that a thing that size should not be able to reach. And Kyle came behind it, and the dust came up behind them both. I tried to keep the lens on him. I want to be honest that near the end I could not. Not because the ground stopped my view, because my hands were shaking too badly to hold the glass steady. And the last clear thing I have, the last clear thing on the footage, is his hand, one open hand dragging across the gravel with the finger spread, reaching for anything, closing on nothing, pale against the pale dust, going away from me toward the dark under the trees. The drag mark went from the middle of the wash to the tree line. It went in a straight line. It did not waver. and at the tree line it stopped because that is where the open ground stopped. And past the first trees, my lens could not follow, and neither could anything else. The dust hung in the air over the wash for a while after. Then the wind took it, and there was just the mark on the ground and the quiet. I sat on that rim for a long time after it was over. I do not know how long. The sun moved. At some point, I realized I was still holding the camera and that it had been running the whole time, and I turned it off and I hiked out and I did not tell a soul. I want to explain why, because people judge me for it, and they are not wrong too. But I want them to at least judge the real thing. I did not stay quiet to protect myself, not mostly. I stayed quiet because I did the arithmetic on that rim, and the arithmetic said that nothing I had was going to help. I did not know the young man's name. My footage did not show a face I could give them or a place they did not already have. It showed a thing that would end my life as I knew it the moment I handed it over. And it showed me sitting on a rim doing nothing, and it would not bring him back, and it would not catch anything, because you do not catch that. And there was the shot I did not take. I have gone over it 10,000 times, whether a shot in the air might have startled it into dropping him, whether it might have bought him 3 seconds, whether 3 seconds would have been enough, and I do not know. I will never know, and I did not want to sit in a room and have someone else ask me the question I cannot stop asking myself. So I said nothing for over a year, and what changed is that I started to think about the advice, about all the young men out there right now reading the same books and magazines Kyle read, memorizing the same rules, walking into that country, certain that if the worst happens, they know the procedure. And I thought, I am the one person alive who watched the procedure run all the way to the end. If I stay quiet, the advice stays clean. Nobody ever hears about the time it failed because the only witness kept his mouth shut. That is why I finally talked. Not for Kyle. It is too late for Kyle. For the next one, who is out there right now, small and still and certain, waiting for something to lose interest that has never once in all of this been the least bit interested in leaving? Reporter voice returns here. Kyle Roberts was reported missing 3 days after he was expected home. A search of the drainage recovered his day pack and a disposable camera from the tree line at the north end of the wash. The drag impression Gary Pell describes was documented by the responding ranger and photographed, and it is noted in the incident file as an unexplained ground disturbance approximately 40 meters in length, terminating at the timber. No remains were recovered. The manner of disappearance is listed as undetermined. Gary Pell did not come forward at the time of the search. He did not provide his footage to authorities until more than a year later, and when he did, he provided it without a name attached and asked that his account be treated as anecdotal. He has said to the few people he has spoken to about it that he stayed silent because there was nothing on the recording that would help anyone find the young man, and because he did not believe he would be believed, and because he did not want to explain, on a record, why he did not fire the shot. The camera recovered at the scene had not been used. The film inside was blank, every frame of it, because Kyle Roberts kept it in his pack the entire time, because the advice he was following told him to stay still and give the thing nothing. And a man reaching for a camera is a man moving, and he had done everything he was told. Here is what the advice never accounted for. The advice was built on a guess about what the creature wanted. It guessed that the thing was scanning for a threat, and that if you could convince it you were not one, it would let you go. Every rule came from that guess. Do not run, do not stare, do not challenge, get small, wait it out. But it was never asking whether Kyle was a threat. That is the part the advice got fatally wrong. It knew he was not a threat from a quarter mile off. The passivity did not answer the question it was asking. The passivity answered a question it had already stopped asking. And the only thing making yourself small and still and unresisting actually accomplishes in front of something that has already decided is that you make yourself easy to carry. He did not do anything wrong by the rules. That is the horror of it. He followed the advice perfectly. The advice was the thing that killed him. So there they are. Two men, one of them thought the thing had no mind. And he walked up and put his hand on its face to prove it, and it closed its hand over his shoulder and showed him the mind he swore it did not have. The other one knew it had a mind and thought a mind could be managed with the right posture and the right stillness. And he sat down in the open and made himself small and quiet and easy. And it carried him off across ground he had chosen because it felt safe. One of them refused to believe it could think. The other one thought he knew how it thought. And whatever the truth is about that thing in the trees, both of those men found the same edge of it from opposite directions in the same last second. Think about how strange that is. Tyler and Kyle had opposite theories. Tyler said it had no mind at all. Kyle said it had a mind he could steer. They could not both be right, and in a way neither of them was. But here's the part that keeps me up. It did not matter which one of them was right. The thing did not care what they believed about it. Tyler walked toward it, certain it was simple, and Kyle sat down in front of it, certain he was clever. And it took them both the same way without hurry. In ground, they had each chosen because it felt safe, because that is the one thing both theories share underneath. Both of them are a story a person tells himself so he can stop being afraid. It is just an ape, so I am safe. I know the procedure, so I am safe. Different words, same job. And the job of both of them is to let you get closer than you should to something that has been waiting the entire time for a human being to feel safe enough to close the distance. The thing does not need you to be wrong about it. It only needs you to be sure.
Maybe it is just an animal. Maybe the tracks are hoaxes, and the sounds are elk, and the arrangement of sticks was the wind, and the drag marks in the wash was a bear after all. Maybe both of these men died of ordinary things in an ordinary country, and the rest is just the stories we build on top of the parts we cannot explain. Or maybe there is something up in the high timber and the dry pine that has watched us long enough to know exactly what we tell ourselves, and knows that the man who thinks it is mindless and the man who thinks he understands it are, in the end, standing in the exact same place. Real or fake, you decide. I was Alex, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.